on my laptop to check my email before heading out, quickly confirmed a holiday flight for Thanksgiving, booked my flu shot, friendly reminder for those who haven't done it yet, and of course, scoured LinkedIn to see what UNA USA family was up to. So shout out to UNA Southern Illinois for being so patient and listening to me tonight. But yeah, my Wednesday morning was pretty typical. And in the time between my alarm going off and me showing up here, I can count a dozen moments made possible because of the collaboration between the US and the United Nations. For example, Internet, the International Telecommunication Union, my Colombian coffee, the International Maritime Organization, Flight, International Civil Aviation Organization, vaccination, obviously, WHO, World Health Organization, social media, the new Global Digital Compact. You see, we often think of the UN as this vast global body that works over there. And but what I know well is that for all the work the UN does, indeed work over there, and work heroically, it works right here too. And I'd say that many Americans forget this or simply do not know how valuable of a partner the UN is to the US. You know, there's the occasional crisis or negotiation that draws attention, but not the daily work of the UN. The UN works to protect 26 of the US's World Heritage Sites and protect our borders from global diseases and illicit drug trafficking. In partnership with US federal agencies, the UN works in areas of commerce, security, tourism, and environmental protection. On top of this, the UN financially benefits the US. $2.4 billion, with a B, dollars in UN contracts were awarded to US businesses in fiscal year 2022, more than what the US paid in UN regular budget and peacekeeping dues that year. But unfortunately, in the very loud world in which we live, it's easy to miss the quieter work, the invisible work of organizations like the UN. And that quieter work is at play on my Wednesday morning, just as it is on Wednesday mornings across and around the world. For example, like in Ukraine, when headlines flash messages about Putin's illegal war and people balk at failures of diplomacy to end it, what's missing in the story is the steady, quiet hand of diplomacy at work. The UN is there, ensuring World Heritage Sites in Kyiv are protected, that underground subway stations turned classrooms keep kids learning, that demining dogs are deployed to clear farmlands and bring agriculture back to the country, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency observers remain nuclear facility in the country. While important conversations unfold about peacekeeping and its continued evolution, 90,000 people still put on their blue helmets every day and quietly head to their posts in the most dangerous regions in the world. Under the banner of the UN, they keep humanitarian corridors accessible for aid deliveries. They protect polling stations during elections, escort health workers to clinics and communities to vaccinate children. They observe fragile peace agreements. Every single day, they're working quietly and diligently to do the really important work. In Gaza, more than 560,000 children ages below 10 have received the first of 2 doses of the polio vaccine in early September, after the destruction of water and sanitation systems led to a resurgence of the deadly disease. Aid workers reached more than 90% of target vaccine coverage in the first phase. This success was due to the coordinated ground efforts between UNRWA, WHO, and UNICEF. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that World Polio Day is on the same day as UN Day. Last week, the second round of emergency polio vaccination began on October 14th in Gaza to vaccinate an estimated 590,000 children under the ages of 10 with a second dose. Once again, meticulous planning, coordination, and implementation will see an extensive network of teams vaccinating at select health facilities and outreach posts. Mobile teams will actively reach out to families living in shelters, tents, and camps for internally displaced people. The first round demonstrated that overwhelmingly logistic challenges, including operating amid devastated infrastructure and constant population movements, can be overcome through an extraordinarily resilient and dedicated health workforce, and strong community demand for polio vaccination. We see the UN's work even domestically, here in our own borders. It's not unusual for me to catch a story on the radio about the latest deadlock in the Security Council or a peace not yet achieved. And while sound bites grab headlines, 125,000 dedicated men and women, including 6,000 Americans and 150 staff, work at the US mission of the UN. They keep at it. They show up because they, like me, and like you all, know the value of the invisible. There's much to be said of, the devastation of conflict in today's world, especially right now. And there's even much more to be said about shortcomings of international systems. But always, always, the UN quietly, persistently shows up to make sure that no one is left behind. The UN is at work with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In 20, including the US, adopted this agenda to solve 17 major world problems by 2030. These solutions include ending poverty, improving health and education, reducing inequality, and halting climate change and more. Since we live in a world of changes so profound and rapid, no country can stand alone when it comes to solving these complex problems. And since the 2024 Sustainable Development Goals report highlighted that nearly half of the 17 targets are showing minimal or moderate progress, while over a third are stalled or going in reverse, we have a lot of work to do. For example, our planet's bodies of water cover over 70% of the Earth's surface. This volume generates over half of the oxygen we breathe. It absorbs our sewage, our garbage, our spilled oil, and 1/4 of the carbon dioxide we produce. When individuals share a seemingly free common good like water or forests or air or peace, we need to come up with an agreed approach to managing it. Not just at a national level, and not just among diplomats, government officials, or the rich, but in every county and every city, including here in Southern Illinois. So here's my 2 asks for you this UN Day. First, it's to get involved, which I know a lot of you are already, in the local work of the Sustainable Development Goals. Get involved in UNA USA Southern Illinois and get connected to different ways you can advance these goals right here in your backyard. And of course, the second is write to your member of Congress and ask them to support full funding for the UN. The House of Representatives has already voted to start defunding the UN, but negotiations are still happening. We are fighting for less than 1% of the whole federal budget. And all you have to do is text the word funding to 30644 or visit unausa.org. You'll be sent a link that has a pre-written message that you can add your name to, hit submit, and it'll send a message directly to your elected officials. In closing, while so much of the UN's work is quiet, we simply cannot be. Now is the time to raise our voices, votes, and funds to remind our fellow Americans that our support of the UN is not just charity, but it's needed for our survival. So as our good friend John Lewis would say, never, ever be afraid to make noise because the UN needs it. It needs us just as much as we need the steady hand of the UN. Thank you so much. And then happy to take questions.
I'm not sure if you were able to get that or not. Can you please repeat the texting number and word and also the website?
Yes, of course. You just text the word funding, and then the number that you would text it to is 3644. And then the website is just our UNA USA website. So it is, and I'm just going to drop it in the chat, unausa.org.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any questions at the moment coming in from Zoom. Thank you again for sharing your presentation as well as that number. Do I have anybody here in person who has any questions? We will go down the line here.
Okay, yes.
Thank you for the wonderful talk you gave us. Advocacy for our chapter here, the Southern Illinois chapter, and I advocate every chance I have in our community and all over Southern Illinois, wherever I am. And lately, because of the chaos in the Middle East, I have been asked people who are interested in joining UNA or becoming active in supporting the UN, the question they tell me that puzzles them is the fact that the UN has not declared Hezbollah and Hamas as terrorist organizations. And I don't know what to tell them.
That's a very good question. I do not want to speak out of term, so I would love to get back to you on that. Because I'm sure it's a very complex, nuanced answer that I don't just want to simplify for you in a couple seconds. So happy to email that answer back to you all.
Thank you.
Hello, Maria. I'm Ella. Enjoyed your presentation very much.
Thank you
I
so much,
have
Ella.
been you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I've been a volunteer some years ago in the polio program in having worked in India and Africa. And you mentioned World Polio Day and things with polio. I wonder if you see any significant comparisons, contrasts, lessons that have been gathered from the polio program that are relevant to the coronavirus effort.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that's a really good question. I think that it's the community approach from what I'm seeing that really ends up solving the issue when we're working together and educating ourselves on what we need to do on prevention together. And a lot of that going again, education is really, really key. And I'd love to give a shout out to my colleagues at our sister campaign, Shot at Life. Maybe some of you all have heard of them before, but they are an advocacy campaign under the UN Foundation that is advocating for childhood immunizations. And so they've been really good about sending folks up to Capitol Hill to advocate for polio vaccinations. And I've been blessed to be able to staff a few of their summits before. And so it's also really great to hear from polio survivors and, to see them, in present and to see that this is still an issue that very much affects a lot of the world, even if we don't necessarily see it in the US. For example, I'm from Tennessee, and one of our congressmen from Tennessee, Congressman Steve Cohen of Memphis, is a survivor of polio. It happened to him when he was really young. And so to have him speak at the summit was just a very eye-opening experience. And I think that sort of speaking to our experiences could really benefit from when we're, trying to fight COVID, because I know there are folks who suffer from long COVID. I don't know if that's the right terminology, but we don't hear enough of those experiences. They kind of get caught up in the conspiracy realm, and bringing those situations to the forefront, I think would also be very helpful for folks who are trying to advocate against COVID.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to shift gears for a minute. This is Elaine Jerkowski. I'm the current president of our chapter. And I noticed that since you're a grassroots organizer, I wonder what you can share for us, lessons that you've learned and some strategies that we can use at a local level to try to address some of the SDGs, both locally and with a global view in mind.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen in terms of the SDGs, working with local officials, and when I mean local officials, those officials who are not at the federal level, I see a lot of really great collaboration between, for example, mayor's office and then them working with sister cities like across the world. I see a lot of really great work coming out of there, and just like localization of these issues. Going back to, I'm from Tennessee, we have flooding in Tennessee, tying the issues of flooding in Nashville to the SDGs, making that more localized has been really helpful. And I've seen, this is my do that across the country, and just bringing in the SDGs as a framework, as an umbrella to give people a perspective of the different kinds of goals that we're trying to achieve. And I'd also want to add that I think some folks are kind of overwhelmed by the SDGs because there's so many goals, but just again, going back to tying a specific SDG into your community is really, really helpful. So it doesn't feel like you're immediately trying to solve all the world's problems, but you have one specific issue that's impacting your community and that you're making progress towards. So I think it's all about, again, localization, specific examples, picking specific goals. Don't feel like you have to take everything on all at once, and then finding key partners, which can be people like, your state legislators, the mayor's office, city council folks. Yeah.
I think there is one question from Zoom actually, and it was about being able to give out aid to Gaza. Let me take a look at that just real quick and make sure that I get their wording right. They asked if the UN was able to get aid into Gaza, or at least partial aid.
Yes. So my understanding is that the UN is able to get aid into Gaza. The issue is it's not enough aid. And so one of the things that we're specifically advocating right now is for and let me just read out the name of this bill so I don't confuse anyone, the UNRWA Funding Emergency Restoration Act of 2024. So some of you all may or may not have seen, but US Congress cut off funding to UNRWA this funding cycle until 2025. UNRWA funding is so pivotal, critical, all of that to alleviating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, in the Middle East. And so that's what we're doing in UNA USA, is advocating for this bill to be brought to the floor and for your elected officials to support this bill, to vote in favor of this bill so that we can restore funding to UNRWA. There's a lot more details to the bill that I can drop the link and the petition in the chat for you all to see, but it's on our main website. Oh, there it is. Somebody dropped the House bill. Yeah, it's on our main website. So if you just go to unausa.org and then you go to the UN Day toolkit and then you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see it there. But this bill is being championed right now in the House, and we're trying to do everything possible we can to write to our members of Congress to show that we support it so that funding can be restored to UNRWA and we can get more aid into the Middle East.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions from the audience here in Carbondale? I'm not seeing any more questions in Zoom. I think we're good. I think we're all very thankful as well. We have one more. I'm so sorry. I see now. Thank you so much. I think you can see that as well. Maria, I can read that out here for everybody real quick.
Okay.
As an international student who desires to know more and participate in the UN advocacy programs, are there limitations to what I can do? UN doesn't seem like a big deal in my country, but I've always heard about the UN, and that's why I decided to be a member when I met an official on campus. What can international students do, and are there support systems or resources for us? Thank you so much for your question, Sam.
Yeah, great question. So I think you'll listen to me here and you'll see my emails and I'll write the word out constituent a lot. Constituent can mean so many things. It can be someone that votes in a particular area. It can mean someone that lives in a particular area. And so to me, that word is inclusive, and I want to draw attention to that because, there are folks who are international students, who are undocumented, who are on TPS, who don't quite have the right to vote in our country, but are still living in our community and are partaking in our community and so on and so forth. And so this is all to say that at UNA USA, we let folks, whether you're a US citizen or not, but you have to live in the US, participate in congressional meetings. And so the way that I do that is I will ask you for your address and your specific zip code. And from there, we get ourselves organized and we have meetings with our members of Congress. We have a specific script of what our asks are. For example, we just did some in September. We met with our senators' offices and we asked them to support full UN funding. We said, this is why we need it. This is what it'll do. These are specific facts, so on and so forth. We practice the script together and we go and we meet with the congressional staff, sometimes even the elected official themselves, either over Zoom or in person during these meetings. And so that's something that you can do as an international student, is that you can get trained up on the talking points and, just be an active participant. If you're not quite ready to like talk in the meeting, that's totally okay. You can be there as support by either reading a fact or just, showing up on the screen. It's always helpful to have, to a certain extent, more people show up, without it getting too, clustered and whatever. But it's important for for our elected officials to see that there is real support for the UN in our communities. In is congressional meetings.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who has a question? Any other questions? Absolutely. I'm taking it back over.
Thank you. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the Global Ambassadors Program, because these are usually students, I think, that become these ambassadors. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, since we do have some students in our audience.
Oh, yes. So I can't really do the Global Goals Ambassadors program justice because I don't actually oversee that program. But so what I know is that essentially, it's a student or a person who's a community leader. You don't have to be a student. But it's just someone who has really adopted one of the SDGs as their own, and that you are doing substantial or substantive work in your community towards that goal. And basically you are sort of cheerleader or champion that UNA USA can call on to do like speaking events, to do like social media posts, stuff like that. We'll ask you to participate in an event. There's an application process. I know the process is rolling, so there's not like a set deadline. If you're someone and you feel that like a specific SDG speaks to you and you're doing really great work, for example, like on global health, then you should definitely apply because we need more diverse voices, advocating for the SDGs, and we want to help elevate you and give you a platform. So I'm pretty sure you can find the application online on, again, unausa.org. So I just, go on there and take a look.
So much. And then, do you know anything about the Youth Observer Program that you can share with us? Have you heard of the Youth Observer Program? And is there something you could share about that? Do you hear me?
I'm sorry, is someone talking?
Yes.
Oh, I can like very, very faintly hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I was asking about the Youth Observer Program, and I know that we've talked about it here with some of our students. So we're just wondering if you can share anything about it from your perspective on the East Coast.
Yes, again, just hopefully a program I can do justice because I don't quite oversee it, but I would say that Youth Observer is an even higher elevated role, one every year. It's a big deal because our Youth Observer program was actually under the State Department. Unfortunately, they had cut funding. from one of the previous administrations, and we've been working really hard to get that funding back. But it is a very like high level position where you will be like deeply involved in UN speaking engagements, working with UN officials, State Department officials, to show why Americans need to be involved in the UN and how Americans are currently involved in the UN. This is a very, very competitive program, but I encourage everyone to check it out and apply, because I think it's a really, even if you don't get it, it's a really good exercise because being a youth observer really challenges you to be a good public speaker, to, practice how you show up at events, practice being charismatic. So I think it's a really great program. And if folks are interested, I highly encourage you to apply. I think we just got our latest youth observer, so I'm pretty sure the next cycle of applications won't open up until the summer. So just keep an eye out for that. And usually when the application opens up, it'll be all over Instagram or Twitter. So another good way to just be plugged in on what UNA USA is doing or any of these programs is to follow us on social media, because we'll post the link and the applications and stuff, and you all can apply there.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate your comments.
Yeah, of course.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It's Olga again, Advocacy Chair for our chapter. We've been trying here in our chapter to interest students at SIU to apply for the Youth Observer Program, and they need to apply early, and we tell them that they can apply online. But I haven't thought that perhaps if the UNA National Office could they approach the model UN on every campus, that would be more receptive and more eager to apply if we're not getting enough applicants. It's urging people to apply because they're not going to get it unless they do submit the application, and they can do so online.
Yeah, I mean, we get tons of applications every year. It's a very competitive process, but you know, it's a really cool job. Like you're going to be at the UN speaking to UN officials. Like you literally have your own platform. We like run your social media page. Like there's, a staff member from the national office that's completely devoted to helping you out, like a talent agent or something. So if that's of interest to you, you never know, if you're our next youth observer. So I'd say go ahead and apply. It's a competitive process. Who really likes to do speaking engagements, I'd say definitely this is for you. Go ahead and apply.
Thank you.
Well, Maria, we really appreciate you sharing your wisdom from your perspective. And I know I learned a few things about the UN tonight, and I definitely hope that our listening audience here, both online and in the room, picked up at least one gem or pearl of wisdom from your presentation. Thank you for all the work you do. We really appreciate your kind of foot soldier, silent heroes that you and your colleagues are walking through, and your day-to-day activities. I know that oftentimes much of what you do is behind the scenes, and you're not necessarily noticed, but what you do is so important to helping people in so many facets, both around the world and in meeting some of the sustainable development goals. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you all showing up. And my last and final plug-in, again, as advocacy manager, is please visit our website. Please write to your members of Congress. I promise you, people actually read your messages. At one point, that was my job. I was in a congressional office and I would have to read incoming messages. There are people that are waiting to hear from you. So if you've never written to your member of Congress, now is the time. But thank you all so much, and I hope you have a lovely evening and enjoy the rest of your program.
Thank you so much. Well, Well, if you enjoyed this program, I want to tell you about some of our upcoming programs that we have planned for the upcoming year. And I do have a sheet of paper as you walk out the door. You can grab one because that will be a good reminder for you of some of the upcoming events. So let me share with you some of the things that we have planned. In November, we are going to have a speaker who's going to talk about the role of media in democracy and governance. And in December, we have our annual meeting. And we usually have that meeting in combination with our Human Rights Award. So we will have that somewhere around the 10th of December. The Human Rights Day is on December 10th. And we usually take advantage of the evening and have a wonderful potluck as well, which tends to be an international potluck because of where our members come from. So it's better than any restaurant that you'll go to in Carbondale, I assure you. So that's something that I would highly encourage all of you to attend. In January, which is Human Trafficking Month, we have a number of activities planned in light of human trafficking. And these things are very much spearheaded by Olga here, our advocacy chair. And Olga was instrumental in working with the city of Carbondale last year to declare the month of January in Carbondale Human Trafficking Month. So we're very proud of that accomplishment. And so in honor of that, we're going to celebrate in a variety of ways with educational events. In February, we're going to look at exploring cultures through the lens of SDGs. And in our February meeting, we plan to bring many of our student members through their Fulbright Association and other student members who are international students together to share how the SDGs are being manifested and met within their countries, to give us a little bit of, to look at it through the lens of culture. And I think that'll give us a lot of perspective to think about how can we take what we learn from these other places around the world and what can we do locally to help also address those SDGs. So that's always very interesting to me because many other countries around the world really aspire to meet the SDGs. And I've traveled and seen what I thought was really amazing, like bus stops. They'll have posters up with the SDGs. You'll see the SDGs as murals on the side of buildings in places I've been to in Europe, for example, and in Southeast Asia. So, other countries look at this as a formative way of really helping social development within their own countries. So I think that should be an interesting program to take a look at the SDGs from the lens of some of these other cultures. March is Women's History Month, and we know that there are always many events around town related to women's history. We always have the university hosts an event which raises scholarships for women. And we have a conference put on by the Women in Gender Studies organization or area on campus. And so we usually participate in those types of things. So stay tuned for a variety of events that we will be hosting or co-hosting in March. April is World Sustainability Month. And so we're going to talk about sustainability and caring for our world during the month of April through some of our own speakers that are members who are on campus. And in the past, we've participated in a sustainability fair, which we co-host with the university. So we're in the process of looking into doing that as well. And then May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So we're going to look at the concept of mental health and mental health awareness across cultures. So once again, the opportunity to take a look at, the health and health equity for all through the lens of different cultures. So these are just a few of the things that we have planned. And as you can see, there's kind of a variety of different topics based on the kind of theme for the month. But it's a great way for you to network, learn a few things, and be able to share from your own perspective as well, related to any one of these topics that interest you. So if you're interested in becoming a member, at the back we have some membership cards. So if you are under the age of 26, I think 25, under the age of 25, membership is free. Otherwise, I think a young professional membership is $10. No, not anymore. Oh, it went up. Sorry. Okay, well, at any rate, it's a bargain. And I think there's a lot of really great resources that you can learn from. And I see a couple of our student members here. Some of our student members have adopted specific SDGs that we're going to work on over the year. So I encourage you to come out to some of our events because they'll have also some time to be able to talk about the particular SDG as it relates to our program. So I think it should be a really great, rich opportunity for learning. Now, I had found a very interesting clip that talked about the history of the United Nations. So I'm going to ask our dear friend here from the library to give us an opportunity to watch that clip on our screen. All right. Thank you. And before we close, I just want to do a shameless plug for, since World Polio Day is this week as well, our Rotary Association is having an event tonight that you can still partake in. So Pam, would you like to say something about that? So only 1 pint is needed in order to contribute and do your part. But you can do as many pints as you like. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Pam. I want to thank everybody for being here today. And please join us at our next UN event in November, which we will send out advertising for. And if you're not on our email list, please leave us your email. I'll turn one of these sheets over and put it out by the door. So if you would sign your name and phone number and email address, we'll be sure that we put you on our list and make sure that you know about upcoming events. And thank you all for being here. And let's celebrate UN Day, World UN Day on Thursday in some special way. Maybe just acknowledging that we're a part of that global system. So thank you.